Hi everyone and welcome back to my channel. If you haven't been here before, my name's Sharon and I make videos about my journey to becoming a psychologist and also other videos related to the 9-to-5 life and just normal life in general. I filmed this video probably a year ago before I got my assistant psychologist job. I thought I'd update it because I hadn't even been doing the process for that long when I made the other one, and I feel like I should make an updated one now that I am an assistant psychologist. So the first section is going to be about my undergrad and also what experience I got before becoming an assistant psychologist. I'm then going to go into the process of getting a post and my experience, and then some tips of things to do before applying. I did my undergrad in psychology at the University of Sussex, and I did it with a undergraduate placement year. So I did my first and my second year, and then I did a placement year in a community learning disability team as an honorary assistant psychologist, and then I went back and did my final year and then graduated. It was a BPS accredited course. That's very important when you want to get into being a psychologist. You need it. Most courses in the UK are BPS accredited, but double check, and if it's not, you can do a conversion course, and that's the same for if you did a sociology undergrad and you can do a master's in psychology, that's BPS accredited, and that will be your conversion course. If you are just deciding that you want to be a psychologist after you've done your undergrad, that's absolutely fine. You can probably do a conversion course. So my undergrad placement was in a community learning disability team, like I said. It was for the NHS, and I can make a completely separate video on how I got that role because that was a whole other journey in itself. But that was a role where I did assessments on people with Down syndrome for dementia, and it was really interesting, and it really helped me get my current job today. In terms of other experience, I had retail experience, which I think gives you a certain amount of skills about responsibility and organisation. I've been working in retail since I got my NI number, which is since you're 16, I think, and my first job was Paper Chase, and then I moved on to Topshop, and I worked in Topshop for many years, both in London and in Brighton where I did my undergrad. In terms of more relevant experience, I volunteered in the Philippines and in Ecuador teaching English on short-term basis, but for the Philippines I do that quite regularly. For Ecuador I only did that 1 year because that's when I just did like a trip away. I was a befriender for the Alzheimer's Society for around 6 months in my first year, and that was basically providing company for someone with dementia. Usually it was the early stages and you have to just talk to them and spend some time with them. Living with dementia is a really isolating condition, and so this role just helps provide some support and take some of the strain off families and clinical services really. I was an online mentor for students at a college level who are moving on to higher education, and just to speak to them, give them encouragement and provide them with some support on how to apply and just check in on them. These children were from disadvantaged backgrounds. I'm not sure where, it was all quite anonymous. All I got was their first name. Obviously, like, volunteering is a good thing to do, not only like to benefit the world, but obviously like part of me was thinking about that personal gain where it's good for my CV and it develops very vital skills for the adult world. I then got a job as a personal assistant for an individual with Down syndrome, and I did this role for 2 years properly. I say properly because I'm still in contact with the family now and I do ad hoc phone calls. I am still a personal assistant in that way, just not contracted. And within that role it was just to support with her activities and be that friend to her, but also keep her safe. In this role I really learnt about person-centred care because I got to work on that one-on-one basis. I also worked as a bank healthcare assistant in a dementia specialist home for about a year, and this was because at this point I realised I needed more experience in the clinical setting, and I knew I wanted to be a psychologist at this point. So I was like, right, I need to get stuck in there, in the nitty-gritty, on the front line. And yeah, it was an intense job. These people had late stage dementia, which is wild if you haven't worked with that client group before. And when I say wild, I'm not discounting from the seriousness of living with dementia, but I've lived with someone who had dementia, and so I understand, but it is a It's wild. It genuinely is a crazy experience. There's ups, there's downs, it's all over the place, but it is so beautiful to be able to support someone in that way. I also worked as a play worker for 1 year, and this was in a organisation who supported children who were rejected from mainstream play services after school. So this would normally be people who have like severe learning disabilities. It was a fun job and I'd recommend it to everyone. As you can tell, there is quite a niche that I've got myself into, which is like learning disability and dementia. Those two areas have really impacted my life. My cousin has Down syndrome, and like I mentioned, my grandma had dementia. So those two areas were really important for me in my life, so I think that's why I've kind of gone down those routes. I also worked as an ABA tutor, which is an applied behavioural analyst tutor, so that's working with someone with autism. It's a specific way of learning and it really helps manage behaviour, and this job was very intense, and I did this job while I was looking for assistant psychologist roles. Moving on to the process of getting a post. Before I even started applying, I decided what I wanted, so where I wanted to work and what section. I knew I wanted to live at home, so that was a no compromise thing for me. So when I was searching for jobs, I always put in London. I just wanted to make sure that it was about a 30-minute drive, and I was applying to everything at first, but I did have a preference towards dementia and learning disabilities because that's what I had experience in, and so I thought I had a better chance in those two areas. I didn't only apply for NHS ones, I also applied to private ones such as Elysium Care, which you might have heard of, and these ones you can find on Indeed, but otherwise you need to be looking on the NHS jobs website. So in terms of my process, I would wake up at around 8 and then log on for 9 and look at the jobs. And this is because, I don't know if this is true, but apparently they put them up early on in the morning. So I always did that, and also if you apply in the morning, then the chances are that post will stay for the whole day, whereas if you get to the end of the day, they might close the post at the end of the day and then you might not have submitted your application in on time, which is really annoying. I would then apply to all of them that were commutable for me. If you haven't done it before, you don't use your CV when you're applying on NHS jobs. You input your CV when you make your account, but then when you start applying for jobs, you have to write this thing called a supporting information. Now, your supporting information should be all about why you are a good candidate for the job, and it's a crucial part of the application process. So when you write this supporting information, you need to be very familiar with the person specification and the job description. Now this you can find on the job advert page. Make sure you read it, and what I would do is make note of all of the qualities that they have highlighted in both of them. And once I've highlighted all of those qualities and written them down, I make sure I include those buzzwords or synonyms for those in my supporting information, because when they're reading through it briefly, they're going to be skim reading a lot of them. So just make sure you have those trigger words in there and that you are showing them that you have got what they have said they wanted. So they've written they want a good communicator. You have to write that in your supporting information. If they write about able to deal with conflict, you want to be able to say you've done that so they can be like check, check, check and check. And that's really going to help you in the application process. Make sure you modify your supporting information. I said this in my last video and I'm going to say it again. Make sure you modify your supporting information. For each of the jobs you apply for, it needs to be different. They are going to tell if you've copied and pasted it, and it's just kind of, you know, rude. Like, you need to put in the time for these jobs. They're competitive and there are so many people out there who want these jobs, so just put in the time and show them you want it. Now in terms of like the time span of things for me, I graduated in May. I didn't start applying until June, and then I got my job in November. So that's about 6 months of applying and a couple of interviews. In that time I wrote about 15 to 20 applications, I'd say, including probably about 15 NHS ones and then 5 private ones. I got 3 interviews, all of them were for the NHS, and on the 3rd one I got the job. Hallelujah. After you apply and you get your interview, it's normally application, interview, and then you get the job, you get the call. And for the interviews, there are very different styles. Go back and watch my vlogs for like more detailed ones, because I literally filmed straight after I came out of the interview, and also my reactions to getting the calls of no's and yes, and I tell you guys all the questions that I got asked. For 2 of them it was just interviews, like basic questions, and then for 1 of them they gave me a case study, and then also there was a bit of a role play. Also, once you get a call back from them, hopefully it's a call saying that you got the job, but if it isn't, make sure you ask them for feedback. They normally offer this, but make sure you ask if they don't, because they give you the whole rundown about what you did right, what you did wrong, how many people were applying. Now, things you can do before becoming an assistant psychologist. So the first thing is get your experience, get clinical experience. You need to get some healthcare experience or care experience. I don't think without experience in the care sector, I don't think you'd get the job, honestly, because you need to have certain qualities which you can't get from a retail job. You need to be a certain kind of person to be an assistant psychologist, or just a certain type of person to work in the NHS in a healthcare role, to be honest. You have to deal with a lot, and you have to be willing to deal with difficult clients and, you know, give them the best care no matter what. A little side note, you don't need a master's to become an assistant psychologist, and you don't need a master's to get onto the doctorate either. I think a lot of people have this misconception that you do need a master's, but you don't. In your application, if you haven't had the experience for the job that you're applying for specifically, then say how the experience you've got applies to that specific role, you know? So before you apply, make sure you set your boundaries. Like I said, make sure you set your boundaries for the location, but also for like the clientele that you're willing to work with. Are you willing to work in high-risk situations like an inpatient unit, or are you a bit kind of wary of that and not that comfortable? Set your boundaries beforehand, because you don't want to get a job that you're not happy with and you're not comfortable working in, and you might just need to ease yourself into that kind of riskiness. Like I said, wake up early, check the NHS website early on in the day, because they close the applications when they hit a certain amount of applicants. So for many of them, that's about 50. And I remember one of the posts I was applying for Great Ormond Street Hospital, I started applying in the morning, and so I hadn't seen the post the day before, and so I was pretty sure it just come up that morning. And I spent about 45 minutes writing the application. I hit apply and it was gone. Disappeared. Poof. It was gone. And I was thinking, what the heck? I spent so much time on this freaking application and it's gone. So just be wary of that. And finally, this is something that I learned along the way, and it is to reflect on every experience that you've had and how those experiences have changed the way you will work in the future. In your supporting information, I would be a little bit reflective, but not as reflective as your interviews. In your interviews, you need to be reflective in every answer you give them. I made a video on how to be reflective previously, so watch that. But yeah, even before applying, you can reflect on your experiences. When you have a tough day at work, reflect on it. What would you do differently? What would you do the same? How's it impacted you? So you can do that way before applying. And when it comes to the time of when you should apply, I started looking for jobs when I was at uni still, but decided against actually applying to them because of like the stress of final year, but also because I was unsure whether they would actually be interested in someone who hasn't finished their degree. I'm still quite unsure as to whether you can apply for the jobs if you haven't graduated, because it is a requirement that you have in the graduate membership for the BPS, which is something that you have automatically when you graduate from a course that's BPS accredited. I don't know if I would apply before you finish uni. Like, why would you put yourself under that additional stress? So I would probably apply after you graduate, and I'd say to apply after graduating, to be honest, just to have everything finished. Like, relax, you don't have to rush into it. You've got your whole life to do the whole working thing, you know, so just focus on your studies. It is a very, 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 very long process. So when you do your application, obviously that's a long thing to do, but then once they give you an interview, you usually have like 3 weeks until your actual interview date, and then after your interview they normally call you back within 24 hours. I got my job in November and I didn't start until January. That's 2 months. 2 months. So as you can see, it was a very long process for me, and it is for many other people. So don't be disheartened when you get those rejections. It's life. I hope this video wasn't too all over the place. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments, or you can email me. My email is always in the description. So I hope this video was helpful. I hope it encourages you guys more and more to just keep applying and keep persevering. It's really, really tough, but you can do it if you just keep on going. So that being said, please like this video if you liked it and subscribe to my channel. It really does mean the world and it just encourages me to make more videos. So if you are finding my channel helpful, hit the subscribe button. I really appreciate it. And yeah, until next time guys, I'll see you later.